Kubrick's The Shining unfolds less like a typical horror film and more like a labyrinth of meaning and imagery. How Kubrick constructed his psychological labyrinth in The Shining remains the subject of film lore and debate, particularly regarding whether his so-called continuity slips were deliberate or accidental. True to form, Kubrick spent years crafting his adaptation of King's novel. He selected the project after Barry Lyndon, 1975, underwhelmed commercially, and many have suggested that The Shining was his attempt to re-enter the mainstream spotlight, leveraging King's popularity as a way back into pop culture relevance. In that light, Jack's endlessly repeated line on the typewriter, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," almost reads like a self-reflective nod from Kubrick himself. The parallels between Jack Torrance and Kubrick are difficult to ignore. Jack is a struggling writer with inner demons, retreating into isolation to finish a major project. Around the same period, Kubrick himself grew increasingly reclusive, moving his operations to a secluded English estate and relying heavily on family members and trusted friends in his productions. Some have even noted a physical resemblance between Kubrick and his chosen lead, Jack Nicholson. In behind-the-scenes footage from Vivian Kubrick's making-of documentary, both men appear drawn, intense, and weary, capable of delivering that same unsettling Kubrick stare. Chin angled downward, mouth slack, eyes fixed with a penetrating, hollow intensity. The Shining was shot on MGM's British lot at Elstree Studios, where the Overlook Hotel was recreated in full. Enormous sets were built from scratch, including a fully functioning version of the Colorado Lounge and the sprawling hedge maze. Although the Timberline Lodge in Oregon provided inspiration for the hotel's exterior design, the actual Overlook was a fabrication. Its interiors and partial exteriors constructed at life-size, convincing enough to feel like a genuine location. The set was so complete that it became a lived-in environment for the cast and crew, almost doubling as a real hotel during production. Yet because these spaces were assembled piece by piece on sound stages, they never formed a perfectly logical whole. This explains some of the film's impossible layouts. For instance, moments during Danny's tricycle rides where the geography of the Colorado Lounge seems to overlap with other parts of the hotel. Far from a flaw, this uncanny dissonance contributes to the Overlook's dreamlike, shifting architecture. In this way, Kubrick was echoing the tradition of German expressionist filmmakers like F.W. Murnau and Robert Wiener, whose constructed sets twisted space and perspective to mirror inner psychological turmoil. By building the Overlook entirely under his control, Kubrick avoided the limitations of shooting in a real hotel and created a space that seemed both functional and illogical. Within these sound stages, he encouraged his cast and crew to inhabit the eerie environment fully, channeling what he described as their collective psychic energy. Behind the scenes, as glimpsed in Vivian Kubrick's making-of documentary, the atmosphere on set often mirrored the tensions unfolding in the story itself. Jack Nicholson, already experienced in roles dissecting masculine fragility, 5 Easy Pieces, 1970, infused Jack Torrance with a mix of cruelty and unraveling madness. Kubrick seemed to mirror that volatility in his own behavior, at times openly frustrated with Shelley Duvall, scolding her when she missed the mark. Duvall's Wendy had already been pared down in Kubrick's adaptation, stripped of the depth King gave her, and left as a near caricature of the imperiled wife. Duvall later said the difficult treatment brought out a raw performance, though the personal toll lasted long after production. Part of this instability came from Kubrick's process. His scripts were never fixed blueprints. They evolved daily, with pages rewritten, discarded, or added on the fly. No early drafts were ever released, making it impossible to compare his starting point with the finished product. As noted in Stanley Kubrick, director of visual analysis, his scripts functioned less like rigid instructions and more like talismans, guides that were constantly in flux. For the cast, this meant improvising, learning new lines with little warning, and enduring Kubrick's relentless demand for take after take until he captured a moment that satisfied him. The 6-month shoot became less a rigidly pre-planned execution of a single vision than an ongoing, uneasy collaboration. In that sense, The Shining was not the product of a meticulously mapped-out design with one hidden answer, but rather a living work, shaped by Kubrick's shifting instincts in the moment. Kubrick also faced major technical challenges in bringing The Shining to life. The Overlook sets were built as solid, functional spaces, complete hallways, staircases and rooms, without removable walls or ceilings to hide cameras. Traditional methods like laying down dolly tracks were impractical, especially for the long sequences of Danny pedaling his tricycle through winding corridors and circling back to his starting point. The answer came in the form of the Steadicam, invented in 1975 by Garrett Brown. Using a body-mounted rig that stabilized movement, the Steadicam allowed for smooth, floating shots that felt ghost-like in their fluidity. Working as operator alongside cinematographer John Alcott, Brown helped Kubrick achieve a visual style that seemed to glide unnaturally through the Overlook's halls. Though a handful of earlier films, Bound for Glory, Marathon Man and Rocky, all 1976, had used the device, The Shining showcased its potential like nothing before. Kubrick relied on the Steadicam to navigate the tight, twisting spaces of the hotel and hedge maze, embedding the camera within the action rather than observing from outside. It allowed him to sustain unnerving sequences of pursuit, like Jack stalking Wendy up the staircase of the Colorado Lounge, or Danny's frantic run through the snowy Labyrinth. In those final shots, as the camera both trails Danny and looks back toward Jack, the audience is pulled into a double perspective, simultaneously running with the boy and being hunted by the father. The result is a feeling of inescapable entrapment, as though the camera itself has become another phantom of the Overlook. The Steadicam gave The Shining an otherworldly quality, distinct from the Panaglide tracking shots John Carpenter had used in the opening of Halloween just a year earlier. Whereas Carpenter's camera mimicked a character's point of view, Kubrick seemed to hover, weightless, spectral, watching its subjects with eerie precision. Nearly every shot locks its subject dead center in the frame, using the same one-point perspective that Leonardo da Vinci employed in The Last Supper. The converging lines of corridors, doorways, and stairwells funnel the eye toward a focal point, heightening the sense that what stands at the center carries special weight. But Kubrick's composition does something subtler too. It diverts attention. By anchoring our gaze in the middle of the image, he leaves the edges of the frame open for unnoticed details that may or may not carry meaning. Some are explicit, like the fleeting visions of blood pouring from the elevator or the Grady twins blocking Danny's path. Others are quieter, like the recurring Native American motifs woven into the hotel's design. These decorations, drawn from the very culture exterminated by the European settlers who supposedly built the Overlook on native burial ground, carry a casual brutality that shouldn't be overlooked. At the same time, it's possible Kubrick was deliberately playing with this tension. By keeping our focus fixed on the character at the vanishing point, he may have encouraged sharp-eyed viewers to search the periphery for hidden significance. The geometry of the Overlook tells us where to look, but perhaps Kubrick wanted to remind us to question what lies just outside that central frame. With all the improvisation on set, the continual script rewrites, and the way the sets themselves dictated shot design, it's no wonder viewers question how much of The Shining was truly part of Kubrick's master plan. The film ends up being both less and more than what conspiracy-minded fans imagine. Less, because Kubrick clearly didn't step into the project with every frame preordained, despite claims that he engineered it down to the smallest detail. More, because what he left behind is a maze of unfinished threads and ambiguous cues that invite endless interpretation.